10 random magic cards rated, reviewed, and assigned a number. Day number 14. We've made it 2 weeks, everybody. We did it together. Let's see what our first card of the day is on a beautiful Sunday morning. It is Sejiri Refuge. This is a land that ETB's tapped. And when it does, you gain 1 life. And you can... It's a Tranquil Cove. This is just Tranquil Cove. You can tap it for a white or a blue. So just Tranquil Cove. That's all it actually is. 5.9, you know, like I'm gonna give lands a much higher score than I give a lot of other cards. You may have noticed that by now. That's because this is playable and a bunch of stuff, whereas a lot of cards are much more narrow than this. So, you know, like 5.7. Can I go 5.7? I think I can. We'll move on to Shaman of the Pack. I love Shaman of the Pack, dude. This is one of my favorite elves of all time. This is 3 mana, 1 a black and a green for a 3/2 elf shaman. When it ETBs, target opponent loses life equal to the number of elves you control. And that probably means they lose the game. In Commander, this is really tough to like one-shot an opponent with. Depends on their life total, obviously. But you can like 15 an opponent very easily in Commander if you built your elf deck right. And I personally believe that if you built your elf deck right, it is green-black. I just don't think there's an excuse to not build green-black elves. All the best commanders for elves are green-black. So... And all the other best elves that are mono green can just be in your 99. Who cares? You know, you need them that bad. But Shaman of the Pack is amazing to blink, and there's plenty of ways to do that. In this color combination, there's lots of ways to bring it back from the graveyard to the battlefield or to your hand or whatever, recast it. So this is just like cheating in a lot of ways. You know, you don't have to get through for combat damage. You don't have to overwhelm your opponents with your elves like a colony of ants or anything like that. You just have to have enough elves to, you know, play Shaman of the Pack and kill one person at the table and then do it again and again and again or whatever it takes. So I love Shaman of the Pack. Again, in my top 5 elves like that have ever been printed. And I think a necessary card for green-black elves and Commander, which will always be one of the most popular Commander decks. So all that considered, what does the secret lair drop look like? Oh, crap. It looks like crap. That's okay. So I'm going to give this, sorry, a 6.9, which sounds, I think, low considering how much I just talked a card up, but obviously it's only in the one deck. So it's an extremely narrow card, but very good in that deck. In the elves deck specifically, this is like a 9.4. You need this, but we'll move on to Frontier Mastodon. 3 mana, 2 and a green for a 3/2 elephant with Ferocious. When it ETBs, it gets +1/+1 counter if you have a dude with power 4 or greater. So draft special, everybody. Let's give it a 1.21, something like that. Moving on to Arwen, Mortal Queen. This is 3 mana, 1 a green and a white for a 2/2 legendary elf noble. It enters the battlefield with an indestructible counter on it. You can pay 1 and remove the indestructible counter from it to have another target creature gain indestructible until end of turn. Put a +1/+1 counter and a lifelink counter on that creature, and a +1/+1 counter and a lifelink counter on Arwen. So you gotta love the flavor here, sacrificing her immortality to save somebody else. Pretty cute. But altogether a good magic card too. Right? A 3 mana 2/2 indestructible is not the worst deal in the world, and being able to effectively, you know, not move their indestructible counter to something else, but at least save something for a turn and make both Arwen and that creature larger and double lifelink. Like, all of this is good. I hate to read the card to you twice. I do that way too often, but just to kind of restate like how busted some of these abilities can be in a game of Magic. So I really do like Arwen. I've liked this since the first time I read it, and I think more Selesnya Commander decks should probably play this. And honestly, I just think there should be more Selesnya Commander decks, but I don't think this is an incredible Commander. I just think it goes in a lot of 99s. So I'm going to give this card a 6.68, I think, because that's how much I like it. You may notice that that's a pretty high score. It's because it's a really good Magic card. Next is Shared Fate. Only ever printed in Mirrodin and the List. This is 5 mana, 4 and a blue for an enchantment. If a player would draw a card, that player removes the top card of an opponent's library from the game face down instead. Each player may look at and play cards he or she removed from the game with Shared Fate, as though they were in his or her hand. This is mostly known for combo setups, although those combo setups are usually very expensive, easy to see coming, easily interacted with, you know what I mean? So I'm not sure that Shared Fate is a great Magic card, but if you want to meme and do like really fun stuff, which like who doesn't, then like, Shared Fate is something you might consider on occasion. So I'll give the card a 4.9, mostly because of its reputation, because it used to have one. And honestly, it does stuff even all the way up to now. We just saw a card from Bloomburrow that this works pretty well with, actually. Something that you would normally punish you for drawing cards or having cards in your hand or something like that, but in this case, you will not have cards in your hand. You'll only ever remove stuff from your opponent's library. So, little under a 5, because again, the setups are narrow and kind of easy to interact with. A little fragile. So, but when you can pull it off, it's fun, boy. But moving on to Animal Sanctuary. Love this card, man. Just a land that taps for a colorless. Or you can pay 2 and tap it to put a +1/+1 counter on target bird, cat, dog, goat, ox, or snake. So a weird combination of different things, but it's a lot of different animal types. If you're playing any of these creature types as your commander deck, you definitely want this card. Very narrow, and I hate keeping, having to say that like over and over, but for the decks that want it, it is kind of a little bit of a must-play card. Like just slightly, right? So like in your dog deck or your goat deck, I know everybody has a goat deck, but cat decks, like that's a real thing. I had a cat commander deck. So, you play Animal Sanctuary. In those decks, it's like 7.5. It's not the best card in the world, maybe an 8, right? But in most decks, I just got to give this like a 4.1, but decks that want it really, really, really want it. But we'll move on to Annul. This is a single blue mana for an instant that counters an artifact or enchantment spell. We just talked about this card in like yesterday's video because we got to see, what was it, Defabricate, that for 2 mana has Annul plus exile plus another mode. So we've come a long way from Annul, but if you can't tell, this is in 3 different World Champion decks because it's one of the better sideboard cards that's ever been printed. So you got to give Annul like at least some respect towards its name. So I'm just going to give this card like a 5.6, and that will be enough respect for me. Thank you very much. Moving on to Black Market Connections. This is a pretty sweet card here that I actually feel like I thought it was printed before this, but apparently it was printed for the first time in Battle for Baldur's Gate, Commander Legends. 3 mana, 2 and a black for an enchantment. At the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, choose 1 or more. You can sell Contraband, that's create a treasure token and lose a life. You can buy Information, that's draw a card and lose 2 life. Or you can hire a Mercenary, create a 3/2 colorless shapeshifter token with Changeling, and lose 3 life. This card is pretty expensive, if you can't tell, over here. The Assassin's Creed ones are the cheapest ones at like $8.25, $9, something like that. But, the original printing, $16, $18, $15 for Lost Caverns of Ixalan Commander. So it looks like they're trying to reprint this card at a pretty good clip. And that's good news to keep its price down, but there's a reason the price is so high. The card is unbelievable. It's pretty much the long and short of it, man. Every turn, it's going to do something good for you. It's kind of a Phyrexian Arena, which is good as a baseline. It's kind of ramp every single turn, which is something Black doesn't often have access to. That ramp is also really good in like Prosper Tomebound and other decks that care about like sacking artifacts or treasures specifically. Hire Mercenary is great in pretty much any deck with a creature type matters because you're making a Changeling. So again, most decks with swamps in them can find something for this card to do. So I'm going to give this like a 7.9. This is an incredibly good Magic card that, again, they really do need to just keep printing until they can't print it anymore. And even then, it's going to be like $6. So really silly card. But we'll move on to Ancient Imperiosaur. 7 mana, 5 and 2 green for a 6/6 dino with Convoke. So your creatures can help you cast them. Just tap a creature while, paying the spell's cost, and it pays for 1 or 1 of that creature's color. But this also has Trample and Ward 2, and it enters the battlefield with 2 +1/+1 counters on it for each creature that convoked it. So doesn't have haste, which is kind of a massive problem. Like, yeah, I'll play a 10/10 for 5 mana. That seems okay, right? But also no haste. Like, Ward is okay. I do feel like there are decks in Standard currently, and this card is in Standard for the next couple of years at least. But there are decks in Standard that could leverage this card if they have enough tokens on the first couple of turns of the game. 7 mana seems like a lot, but there is a deck that plays a 5-drop with Convoke on turn 2 of the game pretty reliably. Boros Convoke plays Night Errant of Eos on turn 2 about 40% of the time. And this card could probably come down on, turn 3 or 4. I would say. I don't know if that's going to be good enough, but it is a huge man that early in the game. And if you have like 4 creature tokens and, tapping for him, then suddenly he's freaking enormous. So if he gets in 1 attack, he's great. So I don't know. I do think that maybe people should reevaluate this dude. Kind of a Timmy card, yes, but convoking him out actually doesn't seem very hard, and he rewards you the more you convoke him. So I'm actually going to give this guy, knowing he's in standard and sees absolutely no play, and I don't think any commander players play him either, I'm still going to give him like a 5.4. I think that like maybe more people should look at him is all I'm saying. But we'll move on to final card of the day, final card of the week, and oh my God, did they give us a good card here. Oath of Druids, 2 mana, 1 green for an enchantment. During each player's upkeep, if that player controls fewer creatures than target opponent, that player may reveal cards from his or her library until he or she reveals a creature card. The player puts that creature card into play and all other revealed cards into his or her graveyard. Note that this is so good that it's banned in Legacy. And not legal in most other formats, but you can play it in Vintage. You can play it in Commander, where it is very, very broken. And it's actually playable in Oathbreaker too, which I think the format might be named after this card. But that's just how much of a legacy this card carries. In Commander, the card is broken though, because you can basically, 3 opponents have to have more, fewer creatures than you for you to not get a trigger off this card. And that's probably not going to happen. Someone on the table will probably have more creatures than you. So if the card went into your hand, it would be good enough, right? I feel like this would still see Commander play if the creature that you get off the top of your library would go into your hand. But no, you always hit a creature, no matter what, and it always comes into play, which is just... What were they thinking when they made this card? I have no clue. Again, there's a reason it's banned in Legacy. It's just an ultra powerful card. And if you've never played with it, you deserve it for yourself. You really do. So I'm going to give Oath of Druids like a 9, man. Again, this is one of those cards where you really have to put respect on its name. You have to recognize its history. You have to recognize that it's freaking banned in Legacy, like all that stuff. And that it still sees a ton of play in Commander, which is probably what's keeping the price on it up for the most part. But I think there is perhaps an Oath of Druids deck that sometimes sees play in Vintage, but don't quote me. I don't know if it still does. But yeah, man, that's a heck of a last card right there, too. That's a beast of a last card. Perhaps we have seen some good ones on the channel, so far in this series. We've seen Blood Moon and we've seen Aether Vial. But this is in contention for the best cards we've seen so far in the series. Certainly, we end our second week with one of the best Magic cards ever printed. I will slide it in at a 9, which is half a point higher than Aether Vial if you're keeping score. And I know you probably are. But anyway, happy Sunday, everybody. Hope you have a good last few hours of your week. And I hope that your next week starts all right. I'll be here tomorrow morning. We'll do 7 more of these next week. Hope you've subscribed by now. We're almost at 500 subs as I record this, which is like kind of insane already. So get us to 1,000 if you want to. I'll be pretty happy about that. I love you all very much, and I'll see you next week. Bye, everybody.